Agron's capture came about almost by accident. Following the murders, there were mass arrests and dispersals of New York teens who were out after a citywide curfew. Officers George Peoret and Pat O'Hara had dispersed a group of teens playing around a garbage can at 1 a.m, and when one of the kids walked away in the opposite direction from the other two, while ditching what appeared to be a knife under a nearby parked car, the two officers grew suspicious. When they told the boy to come over, he acted polite and cordial, which further aroused their suspicions. It was, of course, Agron himself, who, like Hernandez, was on the run and hiding, both of them together in various abandoned buildings and friends' homes, including the apartment of a local gay man who they hustled for room and board. With the citywide panic and mass arrests following the murders, Agron's capture seemed anticlimactic. However, his sentencing, as the youngest person at the time to be placed on death row, was another story. Among those who petitioned for mercy for our children was former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, who by the 1950s had become a philanthropist and social activist. Her arguments were based in part on Agron's age, and partly due to revelations of abuse that Agron had suffered. More on that in a separate video. Due to the efforts of activists like Mrs. Roosevelt, Agron's sentence would be commuted to life, and he would actually be paroled 2 decades later, in 1979, 20 years from the night of the murders at the Hell's Kitchen playground, which seemed to be a slap in the face to the survivors Billy and Sandy Luken and Ewell Reimer. After all, there were many children who grew up abused or from broken homes. This was the generation that was born during and grew up in the aftermath of World War II, some of whom had fathers who either made the ultimate sacrifice in service of their country during the war or came back with undiagnosed PTSD. And most of these children who grew up under such conditions never murdered anyone. Speaking to New York Magazine at the time of Paul Simon's Capeman musical, Ewell Reimer, understandably bitter, remarked, "The Capeman killed them kids and stabbed me. I don't guess that's anything to sing and dance about." Billy Luken. My youth died in the park that night. We never got together again after their funerals. No graduations, weddings, or baptisms. Skinny, that was what we called Tony Krzazinski, he was my best friend. I still go see him sometimes when I drive by Woodlawn Cemetery. Recollections like the ones that Billy Luken or Ewell Reimer related in that issue of New York Magazine are not usually what one reads or hears about when the subject of growing up in the 1950s is brought up, at least not in mainstream nostalgic recollections, though as stated, certain fictional movies dealing with the same subject of youth crime are often brought up and lauded as classics. A brief look at the phenomenon of 50s nostalgia is in order here, since that subject relates directly to how we perceive 1950s youth crime today, or, as it is more commonly called, 1950s juvenile delinquency.